All right, hello, my interactive design students. This is my lecture for our sprint on user research. Specifically, I'm using AI for usability research. If you have stumbled upon this video and you are not enrolled in my class at the University of Colorado, Denver, this video may not make as much sense to you. You are welcome to continue watching, and hopefully you learn something useful for your design practice. But some of the pointed direction and feedback I give are very specific to the assignment that my students are working through. So I just want to provide that as a disclaimer. So before I walk through the materials or like the lecture for this section, if you have not watched my AI for UX design video, you should, especially for this section, for this class. And then if you haven't watched my video on usability research basics, you will also need to watch that first before watching this video, because otherwise you won't have the right context to understand this particular topic. If you don't have the full hour, which I think the full hour for AI for UX design, the video is a full hour, I do try to explain some of the limitations of generative AI during this lecture, but it won't be as in depth as my 1 hour lecture. So check it out. Okay, so as with any research practice and design practice, there will always be best practices for you to consider as you're going through this process. Generative AI is a very finicky tool, and they are more mainstream now more than ever. But at the end of the day, you must realize that there are significant limitations to to generative AI, and also being able to use AI generated insights in your design work to justify design decisions or to support a direction that you're going in. Um, if you've taken my or if you've watched my crash course in AI for UX design video and my usability research video, you'll understand that the output of generative AI is only as good as the information you give it and its source data set, as well as the model that is used to kind of like calculate the right sequence of words based on the sequence of words you've put in. So when you kind of understand all of those contingencies of like all the dependencies required to make these insights helpful, there is a degree of confidence that you should not have with AI generated insights, um, especially if you've provided really open-ended requests, then the information you get back will just not be as helpful and applicable. The best way to hedge your bets against that, though, is to just be very specific in the setup, be specific in how you structure the session, be specific with the way that you word your requests, and also keeping in mind context windows. So when it comes to setting up context information, what I mean by this is for your assignment, you'll be crafting personas, different personas for different devices. So the context information is essentially like the persona that is going to be testing your product. So, your name is Susie, you are 75 years old, and you live alone, and you want to feel safer when traveling around the Denver metro area. So, like, you need to provide that type of context before you just drop in a bunch of your usability questions and your designs to get feedback on. Because what you need to do is tell this AI model like what the frame of reference is, like in it under like through what lens do you want this tool to give you that feedback. In the absence of that, it's just going to go like wild and be very general. So when you give it when you give it very specific context, it can more closely deliver the type of feedback and insights you're looking for. Something that I do in my work is I will load a set of screenshots and I will say, I'll tell AI something like, you are a principal software engineer, and I want you to look at my designs and this workflow, and I want you to audit my work and tell me where where am I missing communication about the technology, and what are some of the misses that I have in my design that I haven't considered from an engineering context. I've also done things like, imagine you are the VP of devices and services at Amazon, and you are seeing this design for the first time, and your executive objective is to, make engineering fun for builders of all technical abilities. And then I'll load in my designs and my design objectives and a brief, and then I'll ask for feedback in that context. So again, you have to tell it how to, like, under what lens to think, and then it can best interpret your question and give you the insights you're looking for. You'll also want to structure your session. So part of the directions are to make sure you prep your questions ahead of time and make sure that your assets are ready to go. So don't use your current session to brainstorm questions. Like, do that in another chat, or do that before you get to the time that you actually need to run your usability test. You'll also want to save out your designs ahead of time. So make sure that when you export them, they are clear, they are readable by a machine, and make sure you also label them so that when it's communicating with you, there's a point of reference so they can give you a screen title and then give you the feedback on that screen. And then that way you don't have to guess like what feedback goes with which screen. Because it's labeled, you'll be able to follow the conversation. Um, You'll also want to be very specific with your requests as well. So again, that goes back to giving the right amount of context, and not providing like such broad questions that your AI model will just kind of like give you an answer that's not helpful. So don't ask it things like, what do you think of my design? That's the same type of bad question you wouldn't want to ask like a human being. When you ask that to AI, the answers are even more unhelpful. So make sure you're specific. So, for example, like, tell me, audit this screen for visual usability issues, or give me feedback on how this design may translate for international markets, or you know, give me feedback about how this design works in portrait mode versus landscape mode. Just make sure you're specific. And the more specific you are, the better answers you'll likely get, both human and machine. With AI, and specifically with like chatbots nowadays, you have to keep in mind context windows. So a context window is essentially like the length of your chat, and it references the amount of information it needs to be able to hold to be helpful to you. And sometimes when chats get too long, uh, these chatbots, they just kind of like forget the first part of your chat. And it's almost like you're starting all over again, brand new with a new chat agent, even though you're in the same thread. So I highly recommend for each study that you run, or each like feedback session that you run, you just start a new chat and you just structure it the same way. So you give the persona, then you provide the tasks, and then you provide the assets. And depending on which part of the study you're running, sometimes it's start with persona, question asset, question asset, question asset. In the accessibility version, it's persona, here's the audit that I need you to run, and then here's all the screens. So you'll want to make sure you just repeat that in separate chats so that there's enough context that it can give you the answers you're looking for, and it doesn't start forgetting information that it told you or that you told it just a few minutes ago. That may be an issue for like free plans, but even on the paid plans that I use, eventually it just kind of forgets what we're talking about, and it starts going off like in different tangents. So it's very helpful again to just start a new clean thread once you're going to switch gears and um, test the design with a new persona. Okay. So, when working with AI, I think I've kind of touched on this a few times. There are least effective ways of working with it and the most effective ways of working on it. And I will explain this to you in the context of this project, but I think a lot of it's actually applicable to any of the other design work or other ways that you use AI. So, least effective is that you provide guardrails and then the AI suggests personas and then you refine. So, the equivalent of this would be you taking my project requirements or my persona requirements putting like copy and pasting them as is into like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, and saying, "Hey, like my teacher gave me this assignment. I need you to create personas." And then you get the personas, and then you refine it. So that is a very, not an ineffective way of working. Maybe you'll complete the assignment, but will you've learned anything? We don't know. Um, Something that's a little bit more effective, but maybe not like 100% effective, is that you could author something. So like you can create your proto persona, and you kind of craft the story and the narrative around a person who is, or like a certain demographic who is using your product, and what some of their goals are, and what some of the common tasks would be. From there, you can then put that persona into Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, and have those tools suggest improvements. So that's at least one step up, right? Like you are doing the work, and then you're taking suggestions on how to refine them. Something that's even more effective than that, though, is that you create the proto persona, and you just go ahead and provide those guardrails and those requirements. So essentially, you've provided context, you've provided your original content, and then you have these AI tools interpret those data sets against one another, and then suggest ways that you can improve, the thing that you're writing. So in this case, the persona. um, what I find effective is when you continually challenge and ask questions, and you refine repeatedly as well. So it's not just taking the suggestions on first glance and incorporating them, or just like asking it to autocorrect stuff for you. It's actually asking follow-up questions like, why did you suggest this? How would you explain this in the context of this other thing? Like having a dialogue with these tools will help you get a better outcome. Now, I'd say one of the most effective ways, though, to work with AI for this project is that you brainstorm with it. So not only do you author and you challenge it, but you also ask the model questions like, if I were to write a persona that captures these use cases, how might I profile the behaviors? How might I categorize the tasks based on demographics? You can you can collaborate with these tools, and you can continually challenge their assumptions while you author your persona. Um, the thing that helps designers and people eventually just go above and beyond using AI is to validate your work without AIs, meaning talk to people and like get real feedback on it, or run your, in this case, like run your usability study with real people. That is a great way to collaborate with AI to get very good results. You don't take you don't take its suggestions at first glance. You brainstorm with it, you challenge it, you validate through other sources, and then you continue to refine. In the absence of being able to, validate without AI, you can even consider just bouncing the same requests off of different models. This is something that I do. So if I'm stuck on a design problem, I'll write a little thing and explain, what the product design is, specifically what I'm struggling with. I'll provide like a couple of screenshots of designs that I don't think work, and I'll ask for very specific feedback. And instead of using just one tool, I'll actually drop the same query and screenshots into all three. So all three meaning ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. And I will actually take a look at their answers, and they're usually very different. And I will like copy and paste those answers into the other tools and ask it to interpret what some of the other tools said about, what feedback it gave on my designs and what the ideas were. And I kind of use like this amalgam of these different tools to help me arrive at a more informed, or, yeah, like a more informed perspective. Again, these are still AI tools, so they are not a good substitute. They'll never be 100% substitute for a real human that you can talk to and kind of bounce your designs off of, or to get feedback on. But the more sources you can use, the better in this case, especially if you don't have access to a large testing pool, which I assume as students you will not. All right. So in this assignment, you are creating synthetic personas. So what is a synthetic persona, you may ask? So synthetic, in this case, I mean that it is AI generated and is not founded on research or data analysis by a human. So it is information that a tool has captured in some way, shape, or form, could have captured research from a person, but it did not conduct that research itself. Therefore, the results and the synthesis are, you know, are synthetic. They've been synthesized by something that is not a human. So in this case, you're using AI to create these personas, and a persona typically is derived through significant amount of research in the industry, like thousands usually of participants, or like thousands of people who are surveyed, will help inform what a persona looks like. In school, or like in smaller samples, we create what's called proto personas. So like a prototype or a hypothesized persona of the target audience that you believe will use your product. And this proto persona will provide some guidance as to the types of goals and motivations and needs and their perceptions of perhaps this goal or this problem set. There are upsides to using synthetic personas. Of course, they are cheap and is a fast way to simulate different types of users and to create screener questions. So, again, upside with generative AI is that it generates information very quickly. However, um, again, there are limitations. So you can compound. Uh, you can compound bad information if you ask the wrong questions or if you have a faulty data set. So again, like your mileage may vary, just be careful on how you word your requests and how you edit what you get. Never just submit something as it's written by AI. You'll always want to kind of put your finishing touches on it and make sure that you are saying what you intend to say. Okay. So your task for this assignment is to create three synthetic personas. You will describe the user. You will describe the goals of the specific user and provide device context and how this device is used to access or to utilize the design experience you put together. You'll include accessibility and usability considerations for this specific user, and then you'll also make a hypothesis as to one design assumption that you made. This persona you'll create, so you'll create three different personas. Each persona will be assigned to a different device. And this will give you a rich enough set of constraints so that you can run your study through these AI tools and get the information that you need to kind of move your project forward. So, just quick recap again. So you have three synthetic personas. Each persona is assigned to a different device. Every time you start a study, air quotes, you're going to start a separate chat for that test. You always provide context first, and then you ask questions. So start off with a persona, and then you upload the screen and you say, "This is the screen where you do XYZ." And then you ask follow-up questions. So, like, what do you notice? How would you book an appointment? If they couldn't figure out a book appointment, what would you have done instead or next? So, persona, context, and then follow-up questions. Okay. After you get your results, you'll get a lot of feedback, as you would with a human, but in this case, with AI, you'll get even more, and it'll all be written, which will be great. You'll need to make sure to read through it and kind of sit with the data for a bit. Um, the analysis and the insights don't come immediately just because like you read it, like you still need time to like synthesize and really understand the connections of the observations to your designs. So I wouldn't try to cram this all at once. And you can, of course, like you can also use these AI models to help you synthesize the results as well and like to analyze the output. But I really do encourage you to do this part yourself. Like the best part of being a human is being able to connect like these different concepts and ideas and apply your insights in new and novel ways. And in the absence of being able to practice that, you are kind of at the whim of AI to tell you how accurate something is. So I would encourage you to come to your own conclusions by reading the data and like sitting with it for a bit, revisiting it another day, um, and perhaps even running the study with multiple models, like the way that I do. But again, of course, like your time, your mileage may vary. Make sure you, again, also acknowledge the limitations of how this technology works. So it's great and, it works really quickly, but again, like there are limitations in how it's calculated and the data set that it has. So just be aware of that and weigh your interpretation accordingly. From there, after sitting with the data for a bit, you'll run a trend analysis. This is all like up here. You can also create data collection sheets. That's what I do. And like for like real life sessions, I typically, like I mentioned, I watch videos a couple times over and I log like very specific behaviors, and that helps me analyze a trend over time or across multiple personas or multiple participants. So when you're doing your trend analysis, like look through the outputs for all of your sessions and identify like what worked well across them, what went wrong, how wrong did the test go. Did some like were these personas just completely unable to complete a task? Like that I think is a very big signal for you to revisit that part of the design. You may also find some novel workarounds to those task completion questions. So what stood out to you, like those are the types of insights that are interesting and meaningful, and like you can really elevate your design when you think creatively about and like you see those trends and you're able to piece together those insights well. The last part is really like for you to critically think about the insights that you got from these AI tools, and if you agree or disagree with them, how realistic that they feel. I know that this is, again, like not a model for what it's like to run research in the industry, but this is kind of a good first step for you to be able to practice running these studies with the tool. So, did you find like certain behaviors completely unrealistic from what you expected? And if so, like, let me know. I'd love to hear about it in your assignment and your deliverable. The next part of your sprint assignment is to run the accessibility audit. So I've provided a prompt for you already in the assignment that you can use. Um, and again, you want to be specific in the feedback that you need. So you can use my prompt. I would also suggest tailoring it again for like the information that you need to improve your product. From there, make sure you organize, you upload organized assets, so you have your set of questions, you have your personas, and then you also have your screenshots that are fully labeled so that when you get feedback on it, you know which feedback corresponds to which screen design. Again, never take the first response as the final response. Always ask clarifying follow-up questions. If you notice that there are flaws in its logic, re-ask the question a different way or challenge it to rerun the question and see if you get a different answer. Just make sure you organize as best as you can and you prioritize using your judgment when analyzing these results. So yeah, all right. So once you finish pulling your AI usability studies and your AI accessibility audit, you'll then present your design updates in slides. So you'll use Figma slides and you'll create slide designs where you show like the before and after of your screen. So before the design update, after the design update. I then want you to explain what you update in that screen and why it was important. Sometimes I need that because the improvement is just so subtle that I might not be able to pick up on what it is. And people that are looking at your projects might not notice it either. So you'll want to make sure just to annotate specifically what part of the design that you changed and why you felt it was important to change. And when you do that, I also want you to cite which persona yielded that insight or which accessibility principle you relied on to help inform that design decision. So, if you have any questions, please reach out. I really look forward to seeing what you all come up with based on this practice. This is a very new way of running research in the industry as well as in my classes. So, I'm really, really curious to see what findings you get because I know I've had some really interesting feedback that I've gotten from these AI tools. So, please reach out if you have any questions.